And we have Lesley Peterson, who's the Director of Conservation with FCC, and she's based in Calgary.
All right, thanks. Thanks for having me. My name's Lesley Peterson. I'm with Freshwater Conservation Canada. We're a national charitable conservation organization. We've been around for 50 years, but up until last year, we were known as Trout Unlimited Canada, and we just rebranded. It'll be a year in 2 weeks, I think. So the new name better reflects the scope of the work we do, where we work, who we work with. We're really not just trout focused. We're, as I said, a national organization. I work out of the Calgary office, and we also have an office in Guelph, Ontario, and we have members and supporters and chapters and partners across the country. So the work we do is really focused on these four main pillars or themes: water quality and quantity, aquatic communities, and their habitats. And you'll see that the word trout isn't in here, which is part of the reason we changed our name. So one of the things we've been really involved with in the last few years is our work with the Native Trout Collaborative. And so this collaborative was formed in 2019 with the Government of Alberta taking the lead, with support financially from Fisheries and Oceans Canada and involvement from other NGO and charitable organizations across the province. And each organization brings a sort of a different expertise and experience to the table that we can collaborate on native trout recovery. And the reason we're interested in native trout recovery is because all of our stream-dwelling native trout in the province are either threatened or endangered provincially or federally. So this is Athabasca rainbow trout, bull trout, and West Slope cutthroat trout. So to understand how to recover fish, we have to think about what fish need. Obviously, fish need water, but it's a little more complicated than that. Some of them have really specific temperature requirements, like Ben talked about. They need structure and habitat and place to carry out all the different parts of their life cycle. And we can break that down into the 4 C's for our native trout here: cold, clean, complex, and connected. So in terms of cold, Ben talked a little bit about that already. Some of them, like bull trout, for example, have a really narrow thermal niche where they thrive. And through climate change and land use, we're seeing changes to that. And with clean, not only are these trout visual predators that they need to be able to see in the water to eat, one of the biggest pollutants that we often see on the landscape is sediment, literally just dirt and mud running into streams that shouldn't be there. And this buries the eggs that could be incubating in the gravels. It changes the habitat and can cause problems with food availability as well. And the complexity refers to things like log jams and undercut banks and pools and riffles and runs and food availability as well. Think of a complex habitat just being more variety at the buffet table. And the connectivity is critical to be able for fish to be able to move from one place to another, whether that's from morning to afternoon to evening, or from spring to fall, or from juvenile to adult. So there's all these different temporal scales that fish need to move around. And we've introduced a lot of barriers on the landscape that prevent that from happening. And then we think about our human needs too, because it's not all about the fish. We also rely on water, and our needs in terms of water are related to our economic security and our climate security, harvest opportunity, recreation, and so forth. So we're thinking about climate change, and to do that, it's helpful to look back. And so this graph here, it's derived from tree ring data, and it shows the swings from extreme flood to extreme drought in the South Saskatchewan Basin in the 1,000 years leading up to 2010. So you can see that our landscape is used to these wide swings from hot, cold, warm, wet, dry. And so you think, great, our fish are well adapted to these conditions. And this is just 1,000 years. If you can imagine, our fish have been fine-tuning those adaptations for 10,000 years before this. So we should be good, right? Because we've lived through all of this and these fish are still here. The challenge is a lot of changes have occurred in the last 100 or so years. And what we can use our fish as an indicator to see how these changes have occurred. So this map shows it's like a report card for bull trout health, basically. It shows adult density, and this is historic. So this is sort of considered pre-settlement, kind of the state of things for adult bull trout, green being good, red being bad. And there's some natural variation throughout the landscape in their native range. This is the situation today. And so we've done a lot to introduce a lot of different threats and stressors on bull trout in those last 100 or so years, to the point that their range and their numbers have diminished quite extensively. And unfortunately, it's a very similar story for Athabasca rainbow trout, who have an even smaller home range to begin with. And it's interesting if you look back at I think it's the 1949 fishing regulations. There is specifically no limit for trout, whitefish, and grayling in the McLeod River and its tributaries. And so can you imagine a time that fish were so abundant that we weren't even worried about over-harvesting them because there was just so many? This is what it looks like today. And so Athabasca rainbow trout are now a federally endangered species. We've been watching them decline for the last several decades. And there are natural limitations, natural threats and stressors that fish face. You know, like I mentioned, flood and drought and fire and things like that. But we've introduced a lot of changes on the landscape, including, you know, changes to how water, the timing and the volume of flows. We take water from the river, we divert it, we move it, we dam it. We have introduced other species that hybridize with and compete with our native species, and diseases, barriers that prevent fish from moving around, and sediment and other kinds of pollution. So while it's hard enough to survive, we've introduced a lot of change on the landscape that makes it more difficult for fish to persist. And those changes don't just affect fish. A lot of them affect other wildlife species, other animals, and even our own ability to recreate and have economic security and harvest and things like that. So if we are looking ahead, and I'm not a climate scientist, but there are some really smart climate scientists out there that have done extensive modeling to help us understand what the future holds for us. And it's, you know, things like more prolonged droughts, longer droughts, more runoff happening earlier in the season, lower summer flows, more fire, things like that. And we're not ready for this. We've sort of developed we've settled into these systems of comfort in a period of comfort that some people might call the Goldilocks zone. It was just right. And now we have really no idea what's coming for us, and we're not really ready. So we need to build resilience. And really, this is our ability to withstand and recover from disturbance and shock. And we've lost a lot of that resilience in the last number of years, and we need to sort of be ready for it. And to do that, we're really looking at the basics, the water cycle. This is, I don't know if you learned this in grade 5 or grade 7 or something like that, but you know, we have a finite amount of water in our system, and it cycles through. And we should really be thinking about water coming to our rivers, not from our rivers. It flows off the land and comes into our rivers, and everything that's happening on the land affects the quality and quantity of water in the river. So part of this also is looking back and maybe even reimagining what a healthy river looks like. If you close your eyes and imagine what you think a healthy stream in the foothills might look like, maybe it's something like this. And you're not wrong. And a lot of stream restoration models and the science of stream restoration over the years has looked at things like this being an efficient way of moving water and sediment on the landscape, you know, a stable flow. And you know, maybe I would love to throw a fly in here and try and catch a fish. The reality is that we have to question what even is normal. And I love this term that Francis Bankhouse used in this book about beavers, about ecological amnesia that we've suffered over the last 100 years. And a lot of the settlement that happened out west here in Alberta happened after the fur trade. Most of the beavers were gone by this point. And so settlers understood the landscape to be a certain way. And as beavers started coming back and recolonizing or being reintroduced, people found them difficult to live with because we had, you know, set systems up in their absence. The reality is a lot of our a natural or healthy stream could also look like this. And this is a system that's beaver influenced. It's complex, it's chaotic, it's messy. It is not an efficient way of moving water or sediment. It gets slowed down by dams and side channels and back channels and soft, spongy riparian soils and things like that. But this also provides a lot of water storage. It provides great wildlife habitat, forage for livestock, for wildlife, and just a complexity and diversity of habitat. Unfortunately, we've been draining our watersheds in North America for a long time because as we've settled and tried to develop agriculture and housing developments and things like that, we've been making strong efforts to get water off the landscape as quick as possible by doing things like ditching and diverting and things like that. And you're losing water storage and resilience and the ability for these systems to, withstand change to just an efficient transport system of water when our natural systems should be so much more than that. And this is still happening. So this is just a screen grab from a YouTube video from a county in East Central Alberta that's advertising their services for beaver dam removal using dynamite. And this happening during a really, really dry period when we're under extreme drought, when that region is in this like red zone where I just don't understand why we would be looking to get water out of our creeks and rivers and land during a period of such severe drought when we need all the water storage we can possibly get. And then some of the diversions and ditching that we've done. This is an actual creek that in the Bow River Basin. And when these creeks get ditched and channelized like this, they're no longer meandering. They no longer connect to their floodplain. That sort of relief valve when a flood comes that the water can spill out onto the floodplain is gone. And as the energy picks up in the stream, it erodes, but it erodes downward and it keeps cutting down and down and down until it's deeper and deeper. And as that happens, the water table drops as well. So you're drying out the whole valley at the same time. And that has implications not just for fish that might live here, but all of the species and people that rely on this water. And if you look upstream of that same place, there are other clues on the landscape besides ditching that have happened to this little creek. You can see where the beaver ponds used to be. And when you talk to locals in this area, they talked about this particular creek being perennially wet year-round. And when we started working here around 2019, we found this creek would be dry in July pretty reliably. And there's a lot of really cool work being done. This is from Sherry Westbrook from the University of Saskatchewan looking at, how much capacity have we really lost in terms of beavers on the landscape. And she found on these two little creeks, Wypress Creek and Jumping Pound Creek in the Bow River Basin, they only support 8 and 5% of their total capacity for beavers at the moment. So that's a huge missing opportunity for water storage, biodiversity, habitat, and resilience that's just gone because of that one species that's missing. But we can fix it. And so this is my pitch. And so if you look at this diagram of the picture on the left, you see that sort of ditched stream that's been channelized and degraded, not necessarily just from ditching, but it could be other land use that has caused that, maybe grazing impacts, loss of riparian function, a whole number of reasons. And no beaver in their right mind is going to go there on their own where there's no food for them, there's no dam building material. When a flood comes, their dam is going to get washed out because the flow is going to be so powerful. And so what we're trying to do is using we're building human-made beaver dams that we call beaver dam analogs that Noreen mentioned. And the point of this is to mimic and promote beaver activity. So we can't do as good a job as beavers can, but we're trying to give them a little bit of a head start, kind of a build it and they will come sort of situation so that eventually it will get better. And really this just involves sticks, mud, and posts, and it's labor intensive. But over the last couple of years, we've built well over 100 beaver dam analogs from, the Clearwater system south. And it's a lot of work, but it is really interesting to see how quickly things can change from there. So we built this complex, and we typically build them in complexes of 3 to 20 in a system, not just one. That's how beavers do it. And so we built these ones in September 22. By the next year, a very dry year, I should add, it was still holding water in the fall, which was really encouraging. And then by the fall, and also that year, the beavers came back. And so they actually started building a series of beaver dams further upstream from our beaver dam analogs, which we were pretty excited to see. And even now, we have even more water being stored there. And the great thing is the beavers do it for free. They don't require any permits. You don't have to report this to anybody. They just do it. And they do a really good job of maintaining it in the long term as well. So now we have this really great water storage reservoir system, if you want to call it that, upstream, that's keeping water flowing throughout the year. So it's great. It also helps that we improved some connectivity on this system. So there was this barrier downstream, and we're all excited about improving fish passage, but these kind of open bottom arches and clear span bridges are really great for wildlife passage as well. And so again, if I were a beaver, I would not be super excited about climbing over a road embankment to try and find a new place to set up my habitat, but I would waddle through a culvert or a bridge because I'm less exposed to predators than getting struck by cars. And then, just another quote from the 40s, fisheries biologists in the Porcupine Hills said that this particular system, Trout Creek and Linden Creek, it would go dry in the late summer were it not for beavers that capture spring runoff. And guess what? That's exactly what happens today. It goes dry. And so these pictures, the one on the bottom is from Trout Creek in 2021, bone dry. The tributary, Kingbolt Creek, still had beavers at the time. That's the only place that we found water in the summer was where the beavers still were. And this is just an example of building these beaver dam analogs and the following spring, how they're already starting to function and capture water and get those processes kick-started. And really, we can scale up. We work in small, wadable streams because that's where the water is being delivered to these larger rivers. These problems are not new. This is a cartoon from the 40s talking about, when I was your age, little junior, this creek used to be clear and have lots of trout, and it doesn't anymore. And we found a place that looks exactly like that. And there's a lot of real estate out there. There's a lot of opportunity for restoration on the landscape. We just have to kind of get busy and start doing it. And, there's opportunity for people to be involved in this. We're always looking for volunteers. This would be a great community-based restoration kind of program. There's a lot of solutions out there. We just sometimes have to look to the past to prepare for the future and be open-minded and continue to learn. We don't do this work alone. We have a lot of partners and supporters and funders. This is some of them, most of them that were involved in the work that I showed. And if you have questions and you don't get a chance to talk to me today, I would welcome an email or a phone call.